Welcome to the March 21st, 2022 regular business board meeting of the Lower Merion Board of School Directors. This meeting is being video recorded with sound for public broadcast. All participants joining via Zoom will be muted upon entry. The board believes it's in its best interest and the best interest of the students of the district to hear comments from district residents. An opportunity will be given for public comment in person and through chat, which will be read by Mr. Roos. First agenda item is the superintendent presentations.
Thank you so much, Vice President Lee, and good evening, everyone. This evening, my report will be brief. We're going to hear a presentation this evening from Dr. Grip, who will be presenting on our current demographic study. I wanted to make sure that we put the demographic study in perspective. This is a study that was done to be able to assess our class sizes at the elementary level as we have Black Rock Middle School coming on board next school year. To be very clear, this isn't a study to have 10-year projections, because as we know, with dealing with the pandemic, the numbers are a little bit all over the place in regards to public schools or schools in general in the United States of America. So this evening, as we take a look at the presentation, please keep in mind we're looking at our current numbers, and again, how it looks for our class sizes and sizes of our buildings at the elementary schools. Now, there will be some opportunities for discussion around some of the information that will be revealed, and I must say that it's quite exciting to be able to look at some of this data and think of the possibilities that we have in regards to further enhancing our school system and supporting our children's needs. So I wanted to make sure that I got in front of that. Secondly, this evening, it's important, it's a very special evening. As we have on the agenda this evening, one of our very own, one of our special education teachers at Welsh Valley Middle School, and that is Dr. Hamira Mobley. She's currently a special education teacher, but Dr. Mobley engaged in the assistant principal interviews for Black Rock Middle School. And I must say that she emerged as an outstanding candidate, numero uno. So with the board's blessing this evening, you'll see Dr. Mobley's name on the agenda, and we trust to formally welcome her to her new position as an assistant principal at Black Rock Middle School. It's a very exciting moment. So welcome, Dr. Mobley. I'm glad you're in attendance this evening. Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure. And with that said, is Dr. Grip ready to rock and roll? Should be. And Dr. Grip will be joining us via Zoom.
You can go ahead, Dr. Grip. Is he muted?
I don't see him.
Because he's not speaking. All right, hold on. Okay, let me bring him back over. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. Dr. Grip, do you hear us? No, he does not. Okay, Dr. Grip, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the slides, and then you can begin speaking when you're ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, hold on one second. All right.
There he is.
Yeah, there he is, but I have to... Yeah, see, now I got to go back into this again. Sorry. Now it's not giving it to me. We're going to have Mike come. Oh, Mike.
I'm going to get past you real quick.
Yeah.
Can I get my computer from you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, Mike, I might have to shut this down. Okay, hold on. I got it. Just when I thought I didn't have it.
Dr. Ramin, you had asked if you wanted to give an introduction of Dr. Grip. I have his resume in front of me. Would you like to speak to it, or you want me to do that? Well, did he
Well,
just
now
get
we're
it
ready.
ready?
All right. Go ahead, Jay.
All right, so Dr. Mamine asked me to just give a little bit of Dr. Grip's background. So at Dr. Mamine's request, Dr. Grip has performed demographic studies projecting enrollment using the modified regression technique and cohort survival method for public schools. He's testified at depositions and trials and expert witness in school demography. He has also completed feasibility studies for school districts considering regionalization, de-regionalization, or alternative send-receive relationships. He's performed external evaluations of educational programs in both secondary and post-secondary settings using both qualitative and quantitative techniques. And he has also worked for the New York City School Construction Authority doing demographic studies from 2006 until 2020.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lowe. Dr. Grip, can you hear us, and are you ready to go?
So now you just hit that when he says next line.
Dr. Grip?
You're in share screen. You're going to have to text him. Tell him.
I did. Any way to communicate with him, Denise?
Just forward, advance the slide.
Send him a message in chat.
Where we go? All right, Denise, I'm going to stop share to chat.
Oh my gosh.
You want to stop it?
No, I will, because you're not going to be able to bring it back up again. Okay, let's see. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put it back up again, and then you can start. Are you not seeing them advance?
I did see the four of them advance. Yes, I did.
Okay, because I've been muting on my end, but I won't mute from now on. Okay,
Okay, and everybody can hear me?
everybody can hear you.
Okay, great.
All right, give me 2 more seconds now. Screen 2. Share. Okay, so now he went too far up. I'm going to take it back to slide 2. And there we go.
Okay. All right, we can start there. All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Richard Grip, and I work with statistical forecasting, and we are a firm that provides school district demographic services. We've been doing this for almost the last 25 years. Done probably about 200 plus studies, mostly in the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area, as well as in Pennsylvania and Virginia. And our firm is the demographic consultant for the New York City Public Schools since 2006, which is the largest school district in the country. Next, please. So I'm the executive director. I have a doctorate in educational statistics and measurement from Rutgers University in the Graduate School of Ed. I've published many articles in school demography, which is a niche field within demography, both nationally and internationally, still published in journals. And I testify as an expert witness in school demography in the state of New Jersey in administrative law court hearings between school districts who really want to get a divorce from each other. Next, please. So the study itself is about 80 pages long. And tonight what I'm going to do is try to summarize it in about 20 minutes, best as I can. So the first thing we did was to project enrollments, which of course is the crux of any demographic study. And we did it for a 10-year period from the 22-23 year through 31-32. But besides looking at the enrollments of the school district, we also look at each of the communities, their demographic characteristics, such as their race patterns, socioeconomic characteristics, birth counts. We do also look at historical enrollments of the school district for the last 10 years. by district-wide counts, elementary, middle, and high school counts, and by school. We looked at the enrollment trends of students who live in the school district's attendance area but attend non-public or private schools. We also contacted each of the municipalities to find out about new housing starts and how that could impact the enrollment projections. And then finally, using ArcGIS, we took student addresses from both the 16-17 year and the 21-22 year to show where students live over time and how that's changed. Next, please. So this slide shows you the historical and projected populations for both Narberth and Lower Merion from 1940 through 2040. Everything to the left of the vertical line is from the census, and 2020 is the most recent data we have from the census counts. It's really all we have. We have very other little information from the 2020 census. But what you should see is the right side of the line that's vertical is from an agency called the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, which projects the population going out to 2040. However, I really wouldn't put too much stake in those numbers out there because that was based on the 2010 counts. And since Lower Merion has grown probably way more than they thought, exceeding both the 2030 and 2040 projections, my guess is they're going to recalibrate the projections, and the 2030 and 2040 projections for at least Lower Merion will be much higher than what you're seeing in that diagram. Narberth really hasn't changed much over time, so I don't expect the kind of change in their projections for Narberth. Next, please. So, as I mentioned at the outset, we do what's called a demographic profile. It's also for people who aren't familiar with your communities to know what they are in terms of a lot of different demographic characteristics. In both communities, whites are the largest race, followed by Asians. And since 2010, the population in each community is having a slightly decline in the white population and an increase in Asians and Hispanics. As with respect to foreign-born, the average in the county is about 10%. And for both communities, you're about 10 to 13%. So you're in line with the county. China is the largest source in both communities. Very, very educated communities, you can see the bachelor's degree or higher is up near around 80%, which is much higher than Montgomery County's 50%. Incomes are much higher than the county, as you can see. The distribution of single-family detached or attached homes are fairly similar in both communities. About 2/3 of the homes are single-family attached or detached in both communities. Narberth has a higher percentage of renter-occupied units compared to Lower Merion, but they're not too far from the county average. And the median value of an owner-occupied unit is over $500,000 in Narberth and over $600,000 in Lower Merion. Next, please. So this diagram is showing where all the schools are in the school district and also shows the municipal boundaries of both Lower Merion and Narberth. And I will just point out this does not include the new school coming online in September, Black Rock. This is just the existing schools. Next, please. This is the elementary attendance areas that show where, if you live in a certain street, this is the school that you would go to. So there are 6 elementary attendance zones, and from my understanding, they have been long-standing in the school district for a long period of time. Next, please. This is the current middle school attendance areas, just for the 2 middle schools. You can see the Ballast-Sinwood area has that little section near Ardmore, which also attends Ballast-Sinwood as well. Next. So this is what it's going to look like in September when Black Rock comes online. You'll have 3 attendance areas as compared to what you have now is 2. Next, please. This is showing the high school attendance areas for both Harriton and Lower Merion High School. Next, please. So now we'll look into the historical enrollments in the school district. So in 21-22 school year, as in the 10th day of the calendar school year, the enrollment was 8479. And the enrollments in the school district, like I said in the outset, we studied the enrollments for the last 10 years. The enrollments were steadily increasing up through the 2019-20 school year before they reversed trend. And there's been a decline of about 321 students in the last 2 years, which I attribute completely to the pandemic. So if we compare your current enrollment to the 2012-13 school year, you still gain, even with this decline, almost 800 students over the last decade. And the methodology we use to project enrollments is something called the cohort survival ratio method. It's the standard in the industry, and I will talk about that in a moment, how that works. Next. This is just showing the historical enrollments over time. You can see that dip in the last 2 years of about 320 students, but before the 1920 school year, it was increasing every single year. Next, please. Okay, this is showing historical enrollments by grade configuration, both for K to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12, which is the current configuration. And you can see the top line, which is the elementary line, had steadily been increasing up through the 2019-20 school year before it declined, and there's been a decline of 364 students in the last 2 years. So most of the decline has occurred at the elementary school level, which is not really surprising to me with a lot of the school districts I've worked with. A lot of students that have been homeschooled or went to private school during COVID have been in the K to 5 elementary grade configuration. The green line on the bottom is showing middle school, which had been also increasing up through about 18-19 school year before it reversed trend and declined. The high school has been continually increasing over the last 10 years. Next, please. Now we'll look at non-public school enrollments. So in this current year, there are more than 2,600 students who live in the Lower Merion School District attendance area that attend non-public schools. And if we add that up to the total public school population, that's almost a quarter of the students that are attending private schools, 23.6%. The non-public school percentage had been declining before increasing in this past year. Next, please. So you can see the decline in the non-public school enrollments over time until this past year, where it's bumped up to 2,600 plus students. Next. So this is showing the public school enrollments on the second line, added together with the non-public school enrollments to form what's called the universe of students. And it's pretty much in the vicinity of plus or minus 11,000 students for the past 6 years. And the purple line at the bottom is showing the percentage of the enrollment that's public. It had been increasing until the last year where it dropped by about 2 percentage points. Next, please. So I did mention we do something called the cohort survival ratio method, which is used to project your enrollments 10 years out. And what we're doing is calculating a survival rate, or sometimes what's known as a grade progression rate, of grades from 1 year to the next. So in your school district, because you have 12 grades plus kindergarten, which means 13 total grades, there are 13 possible grade progressions starting with birth to kindergarten and ending on 11 to 12. So I give you a simple example here that if you have 100 first graders progressing into the following year as 95 second graders, the survival rate or the grade progression rate is 95 over 100 or 0.95. If the values are below 1, it means that you're losing students to outward migration, and if the values are above 1, it's inward migration. So we compute these survival ratios for a 10-year period. We typically use an average of the last 4, 5, or even 6 years worth of data to get an average ratio to apply to the most current enrollment. When we looked at your average ratios, I went with a 6-year trend. 9 of the 13 ratios were above 1, which means that you have more grades that are gaining students than losing students, which indicates an overall a net inward migration. In the 2020-21 school year, you had 8 of the cohort survival ratios, 8 of the 13 with the lowest value in the last decade, which was due to the pandemic. Okay, next please. BERTs are used to project kindergarten students 5 years later. That's another standard in our field. We don't have usually good data for the 0 to 4 population from the census or any other source, so we use BERTs. And I analyzed the birth data by community from 2007 to 2020. In the last 5 years, the birth counts have been pretty stable when we combine it from both communities, ranging between 515 to 545 births. Next, please. So this is just showing a table which is the births for each community aggregated, and then how many kindergarten students come 5 years later and how many first grade students come 6 years later. We usually just look at the birth to kindergarten ratio, but because your school district has a half-day K program, it's more appropriate to compare births to first grade, as you gain a lot of students who attend private kindergarten for the first year before enrolling in the public schools for first grade. So the values that are showing here in the table, the birth to kindergarten survival ratios are much, much lower than 1 because of the half-day program that you have for kindergarten. You're gaining a lot of students when they come in for first grade, and you can see the birth to first grade survival ratios are above 1, much above 1, which indicates to me that a lot of students, a lot of children who are born in other communities are moving into your school district to attend public school for first grade. Next. So this is just showing the historical birth counts over time. Narberth, of course, has had way fewer births than Lower Merion, which is the purple line, and then the aggregated number of births is the blue line. And in the last 5 years, you can see how close that line has been to stable with really not much change. Next, please. So in a special analysis from the Pennsylvania Department of Health, they provided us birth data by elementary attendance area, elementary school attendance area by the school year, not by the calendar year. And they were able to give it to us from the 07-08 year through the 17-18 year. And we show this slide here so you can see that when we aggregate the data over this 10 or 11 year period, that the Belmont Hills section has had the fewest number of births, while the Merion attendance area has had the most. Next, please. So when our GIS analysts start to map a few of these things, you're going to see that the dark blue areas, this is in the 07-08 school year, this is the number of births back then, is predominantly in the southern part of Lower Merion. If we advance it to the next slide, same scale, you can see that the Merion is still the greatest number of births, but the dark blue areas in Penn Valley and Penn Lynn have dropped down a bit, so they've declined in the number of births. Next, please. So this aggregates all the births from 2007 to 2018, and again, it's showing that the greatest number of births are in the southern part of Lower Merion, and the fewest are in Belmont Hills. Next, please. So as I mentioned earlier, we do contact the planning and zoning departments in each community because new housing can be a big factor in our enrollment projections. There are 2,276 new housing units proposed in Lower Merion and just shy of 200 units in Narberth. The one thing I should stress, though, they're all multi-family units. Multi-family would be in the category of apartments, townhouses, and condos. None of the homes proposed are detached single-family homes where we see the most number of children come out of. So even though there's about 25 new housing units planned, the number of public school children projected in grades K to 12 is just 213. So what we did is we modified the enrollment projections, what we refer to as the baseline projections, in the attendance areas that are affected by the new housing units. Next, please. So this shows where all the new housing starts are planned in Lower Merion. Again, this is provided, the addresses were given to us by planning and zoning. We mapped them to show you which attendance areas are the most number of units. Looks like the Sinwood area has a lot, as well as Penn Valley. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see what it is for Narberth. Next, please. Yes. So there's Narberth's proposed and approved housing developments, split between the Belmont Hills section and the Merion section. Next, please. So how do we figure out how many students come out of these units? Well, there's a couple ways to do it. One way is you can use statewide multipliers, they're referred to, from an agency called ESI. They're down in actually the Pennsylvania area. But we felt that it was best to use humps, or apartment structures that were recently built in Lower Merion. So for the last 2016 and 2019, there was almost 840 housing units built. So what we did is we knew the number of units from planning and zoning. We went to the student address directory of the school district to figure out how many students were in each one of these developments. And you can see the student yields, which is the number of students per housing unit, is very, very low. The average is 0.080 children per housing unit, which is comparable to what we refer to in the field to developments that are TODs. TOD stands for transit-oriented developments, developments that are near public transportation such as SEPTA, bus lines, things like that. So that was the value that we used for the multifamilies in the study. Next, please. So this is showing home sales over time for the last 14 years, from 2007 to 21. You can see the yellow line in the bottom is Narberth's. They've actually had a lot more sales in the last 4 or 5 years compared to the time before. In the 2008 period and 9 period, that's when there was the banking and financial crisis. So you can see that dip in the housing sales for both communities then. But in the last couple of years, you can see how many sales have occurred in Lower Merion in particular, which is the greatest number in the whole historical period that you're seeing there. So a strong housing market typically does lead to inward migration of children, because the home buyers are likely going to be families with school-age children. Next, please. So this is just showing the enrollment projections. We did 2 sets, which we like to do because they are projections. The baseline projections are assuming that none of the housing gets constructed, or maybe some, or that just doesn't get constructed on the proper timeline that we've assumed. The adjusted for housing growth assumes that all the housing that is planned will get built out and occupied in the next 10 years. No need to look so strain yourselves on the numbers there. I'm going to summarize it on the next slide. Next slide, please. So what we're projecting in the next 10 years is a loss, which is going to continue a little bit of what's happened in the last 2 years, of between 444 and 509 students in the student population. The 509 is from the baseline and 444 is from the adjusted for the housing growth. But when we look at the new configurations, now K to 4, which is, you'll be doing come September, pretty much stable enrollment for the next 10 years. Middle and high school projecting a loss of enrollment, the most at the high school level, as some of the smaller cohorts that have entered into the school district in the last couple of years due to the pandemic start moving through the system and replace larger cohorts that are graduating. Next, please. So the last thing we did is we mapped student addresses at 2 points in time, the 16-17 year and the 21-22 year. And we're going to aggregate these student counts by census block, and we'll do some other calculations that you see there in a moment. So I'll just get to the maps. Next, please. So this is just showing the student, every point you see there is a student that attends the school district, and you can see the further north you go, the fewer students there are. Most of them are concentrated either in Narberth or the southern part of Lower Merion Township. Next, please. So this is the current year. This is 21-22, where the last slide was 16-17. Really not much of a difference. The distribution pretty much looks the same. So what we need to do is do something with the data and aggregate it by census block, which is the next slide, please. So the census block is the smallest geographical area produced by the census. And the darkest colors here, this is in 16-17, is we're showing the greatest number of students by census block. So that would be in Narberth, and then some of the magentas up in Lower Merion. Next slide, please. So now we go to 21-22. It's pretty much it's the same scale we used in 16-17, so that you can compare them. Pretty much the same type of distribution, dark colors in Narberth and Lower Merion. Next. This is showing student density by census block. Now, census block, as you can probably imagine by looking at the pictures, they're different sizes. So you would imagine that the largest blocks would have the most number of students. So to normalized it, we divide by the area of the census block, which provides us the density. So student density is showing us the greatest number of students per square mile. And as you can see, again, it's all in the southern part of Lower Merion and in Narber in 16-17. We advance to the next slide, 21-22, it almost looks identical. So really there hasn't been a change in student density over time. Next slide. So for each census block, we can find out the number of housing units that are in the census block. And what we do is we compute student yields in each census block, which is the number of students divided by the number of housing units. So the blocks which have the greatest student yields are the ones with the darkest purple, which are scattered throughout the whole school district's attendance area. If we advance to the next slide for 21-22, you can see it's fairly similar. Next, please. So COVID, what effects has it had on enrollment? It has really been varied across the country. I am a resident of Vermont now. I used to live in New Jersey for a very long period of time. Vermont has had a big increase in enrollment in some towns after years and years of decline. We're one of the two big brain drain states in the country, with Maine being the other. And that's due to people moving in due to the pandemic. The larger school districts in the country, as you can see, there's 4 of them I put up there, have had very large enrollment declines. I could also throw New York City up there, which is another big one, but I left them out purposely. The question then becomes is when we're looking at COVID, are people going to now stay in these rural areas, such as Vermont, or even suburban areas if they're moving out of the city? Or are they going to finally move back into the cities because they have to go to work and they have commitments where they have to live in where they're initially located? That's the big question. And no one seems to really know that, of course. But I have a feeling that more companies are going to eventually force people to come back to the offices more full-time. It's just not going to happen instantaneously. I think it's going to be more of a rollout. And once that happens, we might see a more return of some students to the areas they initially were from. Next, please. So to summarize, I'm projecting an enrollment decline for the next 10 years, but the decline is not uniform across the 3 grade configurations. I'm projecting the elementary enrollments to be fairly stable, but the middle and high school enrollments to decline as those smaller existing cohorts enter into the upper grades. And where are those smaller cohorts coming from? It's become in the last 2 years, this big decline of 300 plus students. You now have smaller kindergarten and first grade students that have to eventually move through the system. There are nearly 2,500 new housing units planned. However, they do not typically generate as many school children as compared to detached single-family homes. So I am saying that it shouldn't have as large of an impact on the district as you may think, just based on the number of units. The type of unit is really more important than the number. Next, please. And that ends the presentation, where I will now entertain questions.
Thank you, Dr. Grip. Does anyone on the board have questions?
My one question was around the enrollment loss in the last 2 years. Parents putting their kids either homeschool. You don't expect that to come back in the next 2 years, or the child gets to 3rd grade and the parents like, okay, that's where I'm done homeschooling. Now they're going to go back. It felt like it was more transient, but you're not thinking that's going to happen.
First of all, I have to say the audio quality, I'm really having a hard time. So if someone could repeat that, someone closer to a microphone, or so I can hear that better.
Dr. Grip, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Dr. Grip, Ms. Heltner's question was regarding parents who are homeschooling their children now. Is it possible that in 2 to 3 years they may make the decision to place their children back in person in Lower Merion schools, or do you anticipate that this is something they'll do long term? Is that accurate? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for repeating the question. That's a good question. The hard part is we don't know, and I don't know. I am thinking that some of the people that are homeschooling are going to come back. that's not really the thing I think has caused the decline. I think you've had people that have shifted out of the area. It might not just be going to private schools. It might just be leaving to some place that might be cheaper to live. It could be a temporary thing. I'm just going to give anecdotal things based upon our experiences up here in Vermont. We have people that have come up from New York City and Westchester and New Jersey, and they've been here for 2 years. And they have people I've talked to have no intention of going back unless they absolutely have to. Now, education, of course, is the biggest driver, in my opinion, of why people would maybe want to go back. You have a fabulous school district there. I could consider that would be a reason why people would want to come back. But it's pure conjecture, really, for me to guess when that's going to happen, 2 years, 3 years, next year, next month. I really don't know. But I think it's going to happen eventually. But the inward migration that would come back from that homeschooling, I don't think is going to be enough to overturn some of the smaller counts that have already established themselves within the school district's enrollments.
So then my follow-up is, did Lower Merion area see a decline, an exodus of people in the community to correlate that like Vermont and New York did? So I know a lot of people left New York City, but did we see that overall to say that's the reason why they left, or did they go to Catholic schools and private schools instead?
So Dr. Grip, the question is, did Lower Merion specifically see that migration, that outward migration of people similar to New York City going to Vermont and that type of situation? And what kind of data did you see in terms of families and children that left public schools, enrolled in parochial or private schools, and will those students be, can you forecast if and when they would return?
Okay. So I have some counts of students that withdrew from Lower Merion. For instance, if I recall, in the 2021 year, I think there was over 650 students that withdrew. I don't have all the reasons of why they withdrew, and were homeschool, private school, or whatever. So that's getting into the weeds a lot, and the school district administration may have better data on that than I was able to get from them. With respect to your question about private schools, whether it be New York City or Lower Merion, I think your particular area, you have such a big, as you can see from one of the slides, there was a big bump up in the private school population this year, about 200 extra students that are attending private schools. I have a feeling that a lot of those children are probably yours. The question is whether they'll come back. My experience is that a lot of times parents want a private school education, and they're going to do their best to have their kid in private school, whether or not the economy is good or not, or whether or not the pandemic is going on or not. That's the question, is whether or not those people will switch back and come over back to public school. With New York, just to give you an example, they have not seen the return to normality of the enrollments. We had expected that in this particular year, the 21-22 year, somewhat of a bounce back in enrollments where people would be returning from private schools and homeschool. In New York City, that has not happened. It continued to decline. Other communities that I'm working with in New Jersey, they did see a bounce back. So it really varies from place to place of what happens.
Thanks so much, Dr. Grip.
welcome.
Along those same lines, not talking about the COVID kids in question, the 200, of the 23.6%, is there a statistical trend of what grade those students usually enter the private schools, and then the longevity for how many grade bands they stay?
I need help with that question.
Dr. Grip, I think the number was that about 23.6% of the children living in the Narberth, Lower Merion area are enrolled in private schools currently. Is there any data that would indicate at what grades they entered the private schools? And then is there any prediction as to when they might exit the private schools and return back into one of Lower Merion's public schools? Ms. Chirac, is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate, and even if you back out the 200 kids that you were talking about in question over the past few years with COVID, just trying to get a sense of when they start private school and how long they stay and how that percentage might impact if we made any shifts in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Grip. The clarification there was, is it possible to kind of back out the fact that there was a switch from public to private, public and private, that was COVID driven?
You know, yeah, so when the data that we have for the private school population is just in the aggregate, I don't have the grades that they left public to go private. I don't have even what grades they're in the private school from the school district. A lot of this data I'm getting from your administration. I did not ask for anything in more detail. I don't know if anything even exists. So I really can't go beyond with anything besides the total counts. And as far as projecting anything about the future again, and backing any of these students out, I couldn't get that from this type of information that I have.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
So just one question around the home sales and the projection of, I understand that the projection of homes being built are apartment and style living where we don't have many children, but I'm assuming the 2007 to 2021 home sales are single family, where we do see a increasing spike in in sales, and I'm wondering if that is impacting, or is it just that it's not, it doesn't equate to the building of the apartment style housing, so it doesn't impact as much?
Dr. Grip, were you able to hear Mr. Mooring's question?
No, bits and pieces. I prefer if you could paraphrase again.
So what Mr. Mooring has pointed out is that there is you showed the numbers of home sales. Is it safe to assume that those home sales represent single-family homes? And if so, even though we have multifamily units that are being brought online, and we recognize there's not as many students generated by those multifamily developments, is the continued increase in home sales an indication that more single-family homes are changing possession, which could potentially bring more school-aged children to the district? Mr. Mooring, is that? Thank you, sir.
So to answer your question, I do not know the sales by home type. Just by looking at the data that you have, you're roughly about 2/3 single family and 1/3 other. And that 2/3 is actually considering attached and detached, which means townhouses and condos. So I don't know exactly what the breakout of that is. That's hard to get. However, let's just say that the predominant number, let's say 80%, are single family detached. That would definitely lead me to believe the inward migration would occur within your school district. But if you take a look at the data that I showed you for the home sales just hasn't been 1 or 2 years worth of strong housing market. It's been going on for 4 or 5 years, including during the pandemic. So it's not enough to overcome a lot of the other factors that have already started rolling with respect to the pandemic and students moving out. So I got to be cautious in telling you that, yes, it's typically strong inward migration, but you have other things going on here with the pandemic. Yeah, thank you for putting that back up. You can see, even before the pandemic, you had a very strong housing market of 1,200 units. And I think that attributed a lot to your growing enrollment, inward migration. But even during the pandemic, you had that strong housing market, and it has not stemmed the tide of the loss that we've been talking about.
Okay, I actually have some questions, but rather than have Jim paraphrase, I'm going to go up because it's...
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Hi, Dr. Grip. This is Peter Lee. So, data-wise, you presented the birth counts are stable. This chart here that shows the home sales are increasing. The increasing home sales correlate really well with our past enrollment growth. We know that there's a, I don't know, maybe there's a better term for this, but we'll call it COVID reverse bubble of enrollment, which, as you say, is going to work its way through. That's why your middle school and high school enrollment projections are lower. I'm having a hard time reconciling those data points. Like, I guess maybe I don't want to get caught in nomenclature, but is it a decline or is it a reverse bubble that needs to work its way through the district? Like, a decline would seem to indicate that there's some trend that's pushing it down, but your K-4 projections don't seem to indicate that. So if we call it a reverse bubble, then presumably the enrollment's at least going to stabilize, and these home sales would seem to indicate that it's likely to increase again over time. So if you could talk more to, let's take the COVID reverse bubble out. So we know that that's driving a large part of what you're showing as a decline over time. And then you mentioned some anecdotal things that are happening in Vermont and New York and things like that. But data-wise or projection methodology-wise, what else would be driving a decline that you're seeing versus this reverse bubble that needs to work its way through?
Well, I guess nomenclature, we can call it what we want. You can call it COVID reverse bubble or whatever, but yes, this is strictly, in my opinion. So if you didn't have the pandemic, my opinion is that you would continue to increase in your enrollment. So the problem is, how do you stem it, or how do you flip it around from where you were before? Inward migration is, so you got to think of what the possible drivers are that can change the enrollment pattern. So you have smaller cohorts now in the system. That's what's driving this. So if you get larger cohorts to start entering the system, say 100 extra kindergarten students or 100 first grade students, then you can stem it. So the question is, can that happen? I mean, that's what you're really asking, I think. But right now, I'm not seeing anything to lead me to believe that that's going to be stemmed anytime soon. And that's the thing with a 10-year projection. You're kind of taking data and you're moving it down the line so that by the time it gets to the 10-year point, you can see a pretty drastic change like we're seeing in this one. So I want everyone to understand this is like a snapshot based upon what we're seeing in the last couple of years and what we're seeing today. This is not a forecast. A projection relies on past trends. A forecast relies and predicts things that are going to happen in the future, such as economics, a surge in the housing market, things like that. So there is a difference in the two, even though the nomenclature may be used identical by some people. So that's the reason why you're seeing this enrollment decline, is because of the change in the size of the cohorts that are in the system currently. But can that change if things happen with a massive inward migration of people? Of course it could. But this is based upon what we're seeing today.
Great. And so if I could just paraphrase that, what we're seeing is the effect of the recency of the COVID data in the data set you're using to project out the enrollment.
That's correct. However, I'll also just add to that is that as a demographer, I'm trying to be careful with using the COVID data because we don't want to overweight it, so to speak, and then drag down your enrollments going into the future. So hence, using the survival ratios from the past 6 years, I wasn't using a lot of the COVID years. I was trying to use a lot of the years prior to that to kind of bring up the values of the survival rates because I don't want the COVID survival ratios to be overly dragged down due to the pandemic.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? No? Thank you, Dr. Grip. Do you have anything else? No. Okay. All right.
Can I jump in with?
Oh, sure, sorry. Go ahead.
You can go ahead.
Thank you, sorry. I wanted to follow up on a couple of questions. I think this is a little bit of a follow-up to Ms. Salter's question around enrollment or delayed enrollment. And I'm wondering if you've seen any, either locally or nationally, delay in kids starting kindergarten and first grade because of COVID, so that they might be starting like a year later, sort of redshirting, but more of a larger group of students, families choosing that for their students because they didn't want to start them during that rough COVID year?
So that's a great question. We actually did talk about it in a lot of my colleagues. We refer to it just what you called it, kindergarten redshirting. That was a lot of the theory, was that we knew parents would, particularly kindergarten students, were withholding their students. And the question we didn't really know was whether they're going to enroll them as a kindergarten student or perhaps homeschool them and enroll them as a first grader. One of the school districts that I was working with, they had, I want to say it was about 140 withdrawals, which is smaller compared to what you're dealing with, but 40 of them were in kindergarten alone. And the rest were interspersed, mostly in the elementary grades. But my point being is, when we came back to 21, 22, we didn't see this really large increase, either in the K population or the first grade population, due to this redshirting. And it hasn't happened. It's been a theory that's been bounced around, but I don't have the data. I haven't seen it yet where we can actually say, yeah, that definitely happened. So it's unsubstantiated.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question is around the birth to K versus birth to first estimates. So because we've had only half-day kindergarten, we know that we often have a very large jump between K and first in our schools. And there's a theory, and I don't know what the numbers are, in terms of people that start kindergarten in private school, and because they made that choice to start private school in kindergarten, they then continue and don't switch over to public school for first grade. And so the question is, I know the context for doing this particular study at this point in time was more focused on where we were going to be with the new middle school opening and with our elementary, looking at the modulars and things like that. But we also know that there's a lot of conversation in our community around switching or moving to full day kindergarten. So I guess my question is there a way to model or to predict if that K to 1 is slightly suppressed of a number from what it would be if we started full day kindergarten? Like, would it make sense to move forward saying, okay, well, we expect our kindergarten numbers to now be actually what we're seeing in those K to 1 numbers? Or would be better prepared for incoming students if we said, okay, we know that this is our current K to 1 numbers or first grade numbers, but perhaps we should plan for slightly larger numbers than that, because we expect that there was probably some shift of kids not going to private school for K and moving over. And I ask mostly because I don't want to end up in a situation where we plan out our school based on what we think are the first grade numbers that are going to switch to kindergarten, and then in fact we have more kids and end up with larger class sizes.
Okay. Well, I'll make a really quick answer to that. So basically what I would suggest is that, yes, you would look at your birth to first grade counts and use those ratios and use those to project kindergarten, but I would definitely put in some sort of a buffer for your point about maybe getting a little extra than you might have expected. So I don't know what the percentage would be, but I mean, a good 5% would probably be a starting place of over and above what the numbers would say from the birth to first grade survival ratios.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Dr. Grip, and apologies to everyone. I forgot. This isn't. No, this isn't the time for public comment yet.
Well, the time for public comment is generally when people on.
I'm sorry. If you have questions for Dr. Grip, you can, work them through me, but there's a structure to the meeting.
Okay, that doesn't make it right.
Well, unfortunately, the structure is the structure, but I'm happy to be your conduit. If you have questions for him, reach out. And I forgot to mention at the start of the meeting that President Klein is unable to be here in person, but is joining us through Zoom. At this point, we'll move on to the committee meeting reports. Start with the student representative reports. Ms. Wu, would you like to give us your report on Lower Merion?
Good evening, everyone. I'll start with COVID, since that seems to be one of the largest topics of concerns at LM. Recently, there has been a pretty large uptick in COVID cases, and not only is COVID spreading around the school, but so is the flu. And following the recent mask mandate lift, a good amount of our student body is not wearing their masks, which is totally fine, when they aren't coughing or sneezing on other people. And while a majority of our student body and faculty members are continuing to be responsible for testing when they have COVID symptoms, we should continue to remind others to be conscious about public health and safety. And on a different note, our boys basketball team won districts, making this the back-to-back district title for the first time in 80 years. And although they did not win the game this weekend, they had a great season. And just to stay consistent with sports, spring sports have also begun, which is pretty exciting. And over the weekend, the Lower Merion Science Olympiad team placed second overall at regionals, right behind Harriton. So that's pretty impressive for both schools. And another large student body event that's coming up is our LM Lip Dub, which will feature student athletes and club leaders in a lip sync video. And the video will be in honor of Mr. Hughes. And all of the money raised for the video will be put towards the Sean A. Hughes Children's Trust. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Wu. Mr. Feldman?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Much like Ms. Wu, I will also be starting with COVID. So, of course, ever since the last school board meeting, Harriton, along with the district, has gone mask optional. Overall, I would describe the transition as very smooth. There have been very few reports of verbal disagreements over masks, and everyone has been generally respectful, which is great to see. Also, since last meeting, the annual Dr. Harriton event took place, which is, of course, the biggest event at Harriton. It was a fun night for everyone, raising over $42,000 for the Lower Merion Township Scholarship Fund and the Sean A. Hughes Children's Trust. In my totally unbiased opinion, the show was amazing, enjoyed by all. Also, since the last meeting, around a month ago, Mr. Weinstein, the principal of Harriton High School, during a meeting in the Harriton Auditorium, polled the students on their opinion of the mid-year experience week that we had for the first time this year. The results were overwhelmingly positive, with many students who I talked to citing the need for a break in schedule between semesters 1 and 2. As was mentioned before, spring sports, they just started up, with many of the teams either about to play or just having played their first game. Compounded with the nice weather, many students are quite excited to cheer on their peers. A big opportunity to do this is coming on Friday, when both Harriton lacrosse teams have their first games. Throughout the months of February and March, the Harriton Black Student Union has delivered information on famous black women throughout history. The Harriton student body has really enjoyed hearing these facts, and I'm sure everyone has learned a thing or two. As was mentioned before, the Science Olympiad team competed in regionals, taking home first place. Also, the Harriton Speech and Debate team competed in the state tournament, and I'm told from both teams that they had a great time. Today was actually World Down Syndrome Day, and to honor and celebrate, Heridan students were asked to wear colorful socks to represent the diversity that makes us beautiful. It was a nice way for students and faculty to show support and show off some great socks. And one great event that we have coming up is our Spring into Wellness Day. So it's this upcoming Thursday, March 24th. Heridan is hosting its 4th ever Wellness Day. The first Wellness Day of this school year came the day right before winter break, which students really loved and appreciated. For those of you who don't know, Wellness Days are days allotted to easing some of the stress of school, bless you, by not having any new learning and allowing students to de-stress with fun activities led by Heridan staff members such as arts and crafts, music circles, and movies. My personal favorite are the therapy dogs that are brought in to help students. And it's just a very nice day and overall relaxing for the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Next, the February 23rd Ad Hoc Equity and Anti-Racism Meeting Report. Mr. Mooring.
Yes, good evening, thank you. So on February 23rd, we had a equity and anti-racism meeting that was actually an online meeting that was originally scheduled to be a workshop, but due to a number of events that were happening at the BCMS at the Bala Cynwyd Middle School, we also added a moderated session for a Q&A and town hall meeting with Dr. Mumeen, in which we had over 100 parents and community members stay online for over 2 hours to address these issues and discuss the situations that were occurring at the middle school. And we, due to the overwhelming response and question and Q&A period, we have postponed the workshop to work on the administrative regulations for the equity policy that will now occur at a special meeting where we've combined the communications meeting and this workshop, which will happen again online next Wednesday, March 30th. That's our report.
Thank you, Mr. Mooring. Next, the March 2nd Curriculum Committee of the Board, Ms. Kalish.
Thank you. First, we had Drs. Gaudioso and Albanese and Mr. Bernatowicz present on the K-4 scheduling plan. Priorities of the new schedule began by asking stakeholders for their pie-in-the-sky wish lists and then working to get as many of those asks into the final plan and prioritizing where items would overlap across subgroups. So much of these requests were accommodated in the final schedule, which is really flexible and packed with opportunity for collaboration. Major gains include increasing win time to 2 30-minute blocks, including one which will be guaranteed to have no pullouts to ensure equity of experience for our students who need alternate supports. Increased core and I&E instructional time, that was a tongue twister. Increased library time, an additional STEM special that my 8-year-old has told me this morning at the breakfast table that she is super pumped about. Dedicated morning meeting time, and it maintains minutes for lunch, recess, and physical activities. This has been an iterative process that has made improvements to proposed schedules along the way. Plans are in place to receive feedback from parents on the new schedule. Next, Mr. Weinstein presented on the mid-year experience for our high school students. The goal of the mid-year experience is to find the balance point of preparation while minimizing unnecessary stress for our students. This year, explicit consideration was given to the mental health of students and staff, and teachers were allowed to assign the value of a midterm assessment in each course, where in the past it would automatically be worth 9% of a student's annual grade. Assignments are varied rather than only exams to provide teacher autonomy and variety of student experience. This design, as Mr. Feldman said, has gotten positive feedback from the students. And the most common student request, which was to assure just one test per day, has unfortunately proved unattainable from a scheduling perspective. And finally, we had a presentation from Ms. Frazier on compliance monitoring for special education. The Bureau of Special Education does compliance evaluations with state and federal regulations once every 6 years at every school. The goal is to check that interventions are actually making improvements for students. This gets strong support from teachers and staff who really do want the best for their students and their families. 18% of LMSD students receive special education services, and the evaluation showed an exceptionally high compliance rate. Only 12 out of 1,800 records were flagged, most of which were for clerical errors. The corrective action from the 2015 evaluation was least restricted environment due to the number of students not at their home school because of their disability. LMSD has worked on this and improved their offerings to a level that exceeded PDE goals in this evaluation, with only 2.7% of students going out of district. Based on a staff survey, the focus of this iteration will be professional development, which will include both special and general education staff. The next meeting of the Curriculum Committee will be April 6th, 2022 at 8:30 a.m. in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kalish. Next will be the March 4th Policy Committee report. Ms. Shurak.
Thanks so much. So the Policy Committee met on March 4th. Just some general items so everyone's on the same page is that Dr. Schaefer shared the board docs, and we talked about how board docs is needing to be updated with the searchability and editable feature. So if you're looking for a specific policy that's in the works of being updated, so it's easier to ascertain. We talked through the evaluation of professional and temporary employees for repeal and the evaluation of support employees, and spent the majority of our time on the policy AR 101, equity, the framework for development, and our discussion of the connections and integration of policy AR 235, students' rights and responsibilities. The major work that we're focused on is the framework for revision of this policy, students' rights and responsibilities, because we must revise it in order to better capture our work in this area and each person's role and responsibilities for this. Major areas that are needing to be updated and codified are dress code, procedure for resolution of student outcomes with cross-reference to other policies, discriminatory behaviors, harassments, bullying, and hazing, and really anchor and restorative practice in concert with any appropriate consequences for misbehavior, and with absolute elimination of disproportionality based on race. We're focused on completing this by the end of the school year in order to have it implemented for next school year, and bringing all faculty, staff, students, community members, parents, and anyone interested, stakeholders, and through the publication of our handbooks, posters, and info in our building so everyone is on the same page. I want to share a few key reflections from those that participated that day. That really the goal is to have this policy guide the district's approach to school climate and culture, not to be solely used as a response to incident. And that the work of refining and updating this has been in the works for years, since 2019, but did take a back seat during the pandemic, and so it's prudent to really focus here and meet our timeline. The policy is centered similar to the equity policy, and the goal is to really ensure that the tenets of the equity policy are represented in the students' rights and responsibility policy, and for us to be on the same page that we'll need continuous refinement as it's explicitly integrated with our equity commitment and the work of the equity committee and how it continues to progress. It also must be inclusive of responsibilities of each party's role in implementation and layer on clear expectations and guidelines so that students, teachers, administrators, parents, and all stakeholders have a clear understanding of what the policy is and what each constituent's role and responsibility is in implementation and what to expect from others that are working collectively. We also must be clear to outline when there is a breach that requires consequence, how that consequence is paired with the restorative work that we're really working to integrate. And I already named the timeline, but we'll be moving quickly, and the goal is really to have it guide expectations and have a look and feel similar in each building, as well as the monitoring of the process and the transparency that should be at stake, the transparency that should be in place for all stakeholders. Sorry, I'm very pregnant, get a little winded for this much talking. And I just wanted to bring the community in because it's something I learned in the process, is that administrative regulations, the kind of work we're talking about, actually don't need board approval, but it's very important for us to be in alignment and support. and that the administrative expectations in our building clearly outline those roles and responsibilities, but that we're making a concerted effort to really work in tandem to ensure that we're collectively supporting our students in the best way possible. A request of those that were in attendance that day was really to work on bringing in the collective bargaining unit to provide more clarity and bringing in parents and communities so that the processes and systems we already have in place just further promote the kind of communication we expect of all adults and students in our community. And so our next work and iteration is coming up in some future policy discussions and building on these. And our next meeting will be April 8th.
Thank you, Ms. Shurak. I'll be giving the March 17th Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting report. I apologize in advance. I hope you all had your coffee because this is longer than usual. This is Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting on 3/17/22. One agenda item was reviewed by the committee but left open for full board consideration, a contract for Easter Seals of Southeastern PA for special education and tutoring services was reviewed by the committee, but we weren't sure if we had quorum to recommend because one committee member has a relationship with the vendor. Easter Seals proposes to provide special education tutoring at $98.50 per hour, Wilson Reading Tutoring at $101 per hour, and physical therapy services at $135 per hour. These would be supplemental as needed services. The following items were recommended by the committee for approval by the full board at today's meeting. We recommended the list of district bills for approval. We recommended accepting the administration's recommendation to reject all proposals received in response to the December 3rd, 2021 RFP for supplemental student transportation services. We recommended the following items from the purchasing report for approval. 6 purchases for Black Rock Middle School, $13,041 for 27 Epson document cameras for classrooms from Visual Sound, Inc., $4,237.08 for NASCO for sewing machines for the Family and Consumer Science Program, $19,808.43 for Home Depot Pro, and $893.16 for Amazon Business for kitchen equipment for the Family and Consumer Science Program. $3,425.76 for Penn Jersey for an ice maker for the nurse suite, $775.10 for a 36-month copier lease, and an estimated $428 for usage and maintenance cost from Rico USA, Inc. $10,024 for Cherry Valley Tractor Sales for a tractor to be used for maintenance and snow removal. 2 purchases for Ballackinwood Middle School. $386,750 for Gessler Construction to reconstruct the tennis courts due to their age and the condition of the courts. $27,230 for Hertz Furniture for tables for the cafeteria. $13,091 for Recreation Resource USA for transportable bleachers to replace existing bleachers at Lower Merion High School. $8,233 for Office Service Company for students' furniture in the guidance office at Welsh Valley Middle School. We recommended the following district contracts for approval. New contracts with Lumen for 24 months of dedicated 5 gigabit internet service for $2,338 a month. Lumen for 24 months of denial of service protection for $3,115 per month. First String Sports for use of Bryant Gym for a basketball camp this summer at a one-time discounted rate of $3,750 per week. Renewals with Lancaster Lebanon Intermediate Unit for software that provides prior school employment checks for prospective staff at $5 per applicant. Visual Sound for 1 year of maintenance and support of smart boards currently used by schools for $12,071.70. Amendments with Atlas Transportation for a fuel surcharge when fuel costs exceed $4 a gallon. The surcharges range from $5 per run to $25 per run based on fuel costs ranging from $4 per gallon to $6.50 per gallon. Balgo Company for a fuel surcharge ranging from $3 per run to $15 per run based on fuel costs ranging from $4 a gallon to $6.50 a gallon. Gilbert Architects, an amendment for updated services billing rates ranging from $80 an hour for interns or apprentices up to $225 per hour for principals. This represents the first time Gilbert has adjusted rates since 2018. We recommended for approval a purchase from Dell Technologies for $743,097.40 for 2,020 Chromebooks to support student needs for the 2022-23 school year. This order is being placed now as a preventive measure to avoid supply chain delays, but the vendor will be billing us for the 22-23 budget year. We recommend for approval a revised quote from Wenger for furniture for Black Rock Middle School for $91,592.87, which is a $32,055.45 reduction from a previously board-approved quote from Wenger based on a reduction in the amount of furniture being ordered. I was notified after the meeting that the information presented at the Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting specifically related to the attachments for the change directives we reviewed was incorrect due to a clerical error. After consulting with District Council, the architects and construction manager made corrections for the following change directives that we'll be talking about. And the adjusted directives are attached to tonight's agenda on board docs. CCD 0305 for IMC construction for the deletion of the construction of a sediment basin was presented as having a maximum credit of $39,733.46. But the correct value of the credit is actually between the contractor's proposed $39,733.46 and the construction team estimate of $209,962.53. CCD 0309 for IMC construction for the deletion of acoustical spray on stair decking was presented as having a maximum credit of $12,000, but the correct value is the credit is between the contractor's proposed reduction of $12,000 and the construction team estimate of $19,655.68. And finally, CCD 0306 for IMC construction for possible window shades was presented as a maximum value of $35,374.65, but the correct value is actually $20 less than that. It's $35,354.65. The corrected attachments will be updated in the Facilities and Purchasing agenda as well on board docs tomorrow morning. Apologies for the number of change orders and change directives. We're going to review the increased volume is actually related to the final details and the changes being surfaced as we get closer to the end of the construction project. So we recommended the following change directives related to Black Rock Middle School for approval. The change directives provide approval for work to continue with a not to exceed cap when an exact cost continues to be negotiated or an exact amount is yet to be determined. So the three change directives I mentioned earlier, that's why they're maximum amounts as opposed to specific amounts. So the change directives, Gessler Construction for not to exceed amount of $8,500 for landscaping work related to the new traffic light. Multiple change directives for IMC construction, a not to exceed amount of $11,375.46 for added floor structures to the building, a credit of between $39,733.46 and $209,962.53 for work not needed related to sediment basin number 4. A not to exceed amount of $35,354.65 for possible window shades that may be required to block sunlight at the heart area of the school. A not to exceed amount of $16,535.84 for new stairs and a sidewalk to support ADA and walking entrance to the gym. A not to exceed amount of $17,063.18 for removal and rebuild of the wall at the theater partition stack. A credit of between $12,000 and $19,655.68 for the elimination of unneeded acoustical spray on the underside of the stair deck. Vision Mechanical for a not to exceed amount of $6,516.40 for gas valves at the boiler and Ansel valves in the kitchen. Borough Electrical for a not to exceed amount of $37,552.71 for the addition of electrical power to support gym equipment. But we're not done yet. We recommended the following change orders for approval. Changes for Gessler Construction, $1,800 for changes to the sidewalk and ramps at the new traffic light requested by Lower Merion Township. The changes were requested by Lower Merion Township, not the lights specifically for this change order. $3,277 for a change to the traffic signal box. $495,001 for remediation of topsoil around the site where broken glass was discovered in the existing topsoil, especially in the topsoil under the athletic fields on site. The cost includes removal and disposal of the glass-contaminated topsoil and import and placement of new clean topsoil. LMSD is seeking an expert review to see if it's possible to safely reduce the scope of the topsoil that needs to be removed, so it may be possible to reduce this cost. There was a question from the community at the facilities meeting about where documents supporting this change are available. The documents are published on board docs. The resident requested additional supporting documents and asked for emails between engineers and district staff to be sent to him. He asked why a right-to-know request is required for such requests and that other governmental agencies do not require right-to-know requests when asking for emails between individuals. The committee is not aware of any other governmental agencies that provide emails between individuals based on verbal or email requests, but noted that we will follow up with district council to make sure. Changes for IMC construction, $5,417.16 for addition of extension panels for the library projected roof assembly. $1,712.74 for a change to the curtain wall in the library. $7,208.31 for additional roof drains in Area C. A credit of $48,546 for deletion of a previously proposed water feature. $8,468.44 for additional drywall soffits in the cafeteria, $4,576.96 for undercuts to the subgrade of the roadway needed in some areas. Changes for Vision Mechanical, $8,239.20 to install a main gas regulator and a relief valve, $14,526.12 to add new scupper drains, $10,023.43 to relocate the roof drain at the gym. Changes for JBM Mechanical, $3,830 to modify HVAC access panels, $5,748 to modify ductwork in the kitchen. Changes for Borough Electrical, a credit of $646.14 for deletion of electrical work in the tech area, $9,780.30 for addition of electrical service for dishwashers, a credit of $148,257.28 for modifications to the electric service to the building, a change with EFS Furniture, a reduction in the furniture buy of $69,778.18 based on reduced scope of the furniture buy. And lastly, we received an update on the construction of the new middle school. Construction work continues on schedule, and school district IT work can begin in Area A with turnover of Area B to LMSD expected in mid-April. Areas C and D are expected to turn over late April and early June, respectively. The construction project spend to date is $87,290.63 on a budget of $87,985,821. However, there are some disputed claims that were recently received from vendors that would push the total construction cost to $89,204,557. The construction team and district staff are working to identify areas for cost savings and are working to resolve the disputed claims. Project soft costs, which are costs related to professionals, furniture, equipment, permits, and other non-construction costs, are tracking towards a spend of $15,780,499 versus a project budget of $13,557,217. The construction team is working to find cost savings and reduce scope of the open soft cost items. Two of them were mentioned today, which are the two furniture purchases. There was a reduction there. The next Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting will be on Thursday, April 21st, 2022 at 8:30 a.m. Okay, all right, at this, so no additional agenda items have been added to tonight's agenda. So at this time, we'll move to audience recognition. We're going to hear public comment. If you'd like to speak at tonight's meeting and have not signed up with Ms. LaPera, please do so now. For those of you that are joining us via the webinar, the chat feature will now be open and you'll see a 10-minute timer on your screen. You can submit your comments and or questions via the chat. Please sure to begin with your full name and the neighborhood you reside within the district for your comment to be shared. Ms. LaPera, do we have any in-person comments?
Do you want us in masks? It says so on the agenda, but okay.
Sorry, that was my mistake.
That's okay.
And if you can just say your name and where you reside within the district.
Sure. My name is Jeff Josephson. I live on Saybrook Road, which for those of you that don't know, I stare directly at the back of the middle school. I'm here to comment about the fields being proposed for Black Rock Middle School. I want to start by saying that I started 3 years ago as a big supporter of putting the middle school where it is and building the fields. I remain a supporter of both. But I'm here making public comment because I believe that as a group, both the school board, our neighbors, and our community, we are pretty far off the mark of where we need to be to get this project done for the fields as a group and actually have people be satisfied with the outcome. I know, as speaking only for myself, but speaking with a lot of my neighbors, because we are a neighborhood that's pretty tight and we walk around a lot, there's a good amount of dissent in our neighborhood about our beliefs of what is actually going to be delivered. I can tell you that I personally am concerned about the level of commitment that the board has to maintaining our neighborhood the way that it is today. We're a pretty quiet neighborhood. For those of you who don't know exactly where we are, it's because we're not anywhere where most people ever have to go. Prior to the building of the school, no one ever had to cut through our neighborhood. Prior to the building of the school, there was really no reason to go through our neighborhood on a school day, because if you did, you ended up in Radnor Township. And what we've seen through the construction project has been a dramatic increase in traffic, a dramatic increase in damage to our neighborhood, a dramatic increase in unsafe incidents that go unresolved. And from my personal spot, we see no method for resolution to any of our problems or our complaints. We are always told to call 911. The police department does not take direct calls, which I totally understand as a personal first responder. But when you call 911, a police officer shows up and they tell you there's nothing that they can do for you. We've had trucks in our yards, we've had mailboxes run over, we've had school bus stops run through, we have people that speed all the time, we don't enforce stop signs. All of these things are going on, they go on every single day. And my concern is that we're going to build these fields, we're going to open the end of Stone Ridge Lane, and all of this is going to get magnified, exponentially. I don't see a lot of direct communication coming from the board about exactly what the plan is, but I hear a lot of the word can't. I'm not a person that complains without offering my help, so I'm offering my help to serve on a committee. But I believe that we have to take the neighborhood's concerns into account, and I think we have to find a solution that does not increase traffic in our neighborhood, but gets these fields built. And I'm volunteering my help.
Thank you so much. And to your point, we have a community meeting scheduled to meet with the community and Commissioner Gavin. I'm checking my calendar now. I believe it's tomorrow. Wednesday. Yes, it's Wednesday, so your points are well taken, and we will provide the necessary time to be able to talk through some of these issues and try to come up with some compromising positions as we look to build these fields in the future.
Great. Thank you.
Jessica Zimmerman, followed by Holly Manzoni, and then Sean McMurdy.
Hi, Jessica Zimmerman, Narberth. So when LMSD dropped its mask mandate, it became even more important for isolation and quarantine protocols to be good. They are not. It became even more important to have contact tracing for more than just extracurriculars and cafeteria, and to have surveillance testing. We do not. The large numbers of COVID positive students and staff on LMSD dashboard highlights these failings. So here are my 8 asks. 1, if isolation is to remain the short 5 days, then testing out should be required. The CDC states that if a test after 5 days is positive, then isolation should be extended another 5 days. Number 2, quarantine should be required for unvaxxed or partially vaxxed close contacts. Mask to Stay does away with this quarantine and is in direct violation of the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Health. 3, due to the large numbers of breakthrough infections, quarantine should be encouraged for fully vaxxed close contacts. 4, close contacts should be required to mask for 10 days. 5, close contacts should test. 6, masking should be required at big crowded school events. 7, for household close contacts, quarantine should be more involved than for community close contacts. The Pennsylvania Department of Health requires that a household close contact's 5-day quarantine start from the last day they were exposed to that positive household member. The Pennsylvania Department of Health states that for the unvaxxed, if the household COVID positive person cannot fully isolate, the quarantine must extend to 5 days after the household COVID positive person is released from isolation. 8, allow parents to donate do-it-yourself Corsi Rosenthal portable air cleaners. These CR boxes are specifically listed as an important mitigation tool in the recently released White House COVID plan. Here's my comment on masking. A study showed one-way masking with a high-efficiency mask reduced risk of transmission to 20%, whereas two-way masking reduced it to 0.4%. So two-way masking is crucial to keep our kids and staff safe. An NIH study dated 3/10/22 found that, quote, schools with mandatory masking during the Delta surge had approximately 72% fewer cases of in-school transmission of SARS-CoV-2 when compared to schools with optional or partial masking policies. COVID prevention is the goal because it's not just a cold. Breakthrough infections are now common, and those with breakthrough infections are also at risk for long COVID, organ damage, neurological sequelae, cognitive impairment, problems concentrating, memory problems. I feel that LMSD isn't doing nearly enough. Our high COVID dashboard numbers show that as well as the number of recent outbreaks that we've had. That is it.
Thank you.
Holly Manzoni, then Sean McMurdy, and then Brianne Pessis.
Good evening, I'm Holly Manzoni of Wynwood. A while back when the new middle school was first being planned, one of the school directors made what I thought was a striking comment. She said that we have to make this school the best it can possibly be because it's way over on one end of the district and parents from the other side of the district wouldn't want to send their kids there. That seems reasonable, and I can understand the desire to make this the best school it can be. So I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about the equity committee you have, and you've had some really good graphics with that. The one that comes to my mind is where there are 3 kids trying to look over a fence. The kids are of different heights. And on the one picture, it shows equality, where every kid was given a box to stand on, and the tall kid could see over the fence quite easily, but the other 2 couldn't. Next to that was another picture that showed equity, where each kid was given a box the proper size so they could all see over the fence. And that illustrates equality versus equity. I thought it was a great graphic, and I think it's something you could do with the new middle school. of giving the kids what they need. What I was thinking about is the Downingtown School District, a little over a decade ago, was facing a similar problem with the overcrowding in the schools. They didn't have the kind of money that Lower Merion has to throw into a project like that. So what they did is they took a shuttered school and they created the Downingtown STEM Academy, making that a third high school. And it was a unique project. I don't think anybody had done anything quite like that. They focused on STEM education. Well, that school's doing great. In fact, in the school rankings right now, the Downingtown STEM Academy ranks #2 in the state of Pennsylvania. Interestingly, the other two schools in Downingtown rank number 44 and 67. It's a very, very highly successful school. I'd like to point out, it has no athletic fields. The kids they want to get in, they have to apply to get in, they take a test, they have to get recommendations, but it's very, very popular, and it gives the kids what they want. Not every kid needs athletic fields, and I think you could give equity within the district by giving the kids what they need and having an option where you could create not just a STEM academy or a STEM middle school, but add the arts into there and make it a STEAM school. And I believe that if you could do something like this, then the new middle school, instead of being a thorn in your side, could be a feather in your cap.
Thank you.
Sean McMurdy, Brianne Pessis, Charles Klein.
Hi, I'm Sean McMurtry. I live in Marion Station. And I wanted to clear up some confusion. I've had so much fun talking to people who are for the fields and those who are not for the fields. And what I want everyone to know is that Black Rock Middle School, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Black Rock Middle School will open in September with a lot of athletic fields on site. Full football, track, and football is used for lacrosse, 4 tennis courts, field hockey and multi-purpose field. That's one field for field hockey and multi-purpose, I believe. Lots of large lawns, outdoor basketball, and 2 large parking lots. I think it's important for everyone to know, who may not be aware, that the accessory fields planned for an off-site location that will require busing, they are planned to be ready not for the opening of Black Rock, because residents will live there until the end of the first year of Black Rock. Black Rock opens September of '22. Accessory fields cannot begin to be even constructed until June of '23. So for the first year that Black Rock is open, the auxiliary fields that everyone is fighting about were never planned to be available. So everybody should get focused on where kids are playing those other sports the first year, correct? And that includes soccer, baseball, and softball. And the model exists now at Ballackinwood Middle and at Lower Merion High School to bus students to other places to play those sports that they don't have, which include baseball and softball. So when I hear parents get very frustrated about equity, thank you, I don't see the concern. However, I do see a very grave concern, particularly after the somber facilities meeting on Wednesday, about what used to be a bus driver shortage now being a bus driver crisis. And it seems to me that the time might be really here to think about building up and getting really creative with our existing resources. And I'm going to be really crazy, and I know you've read it in my emails, at least I hope you've read my many emails, when I say, have you considered stacking the parking and taking the 2 parking lots, the 2 separate parking lots at Black Rock, stacking them on top, put a soccer turf field. And then with the other space that you just cleared up, practice field for softball, whatever. So I'm asking you if you are thinking about using existing resources better that do not require such ecological destruction. Thank you.
Brianne?
Hi, I'm Brianne Passis. I'm from Bala Kinwood, and I'm going to be a little bit shorter than Sean and Holly, but I'm also going to be talking about the accessory fields. And I've heard that the alternative options for accessory fields have been exhausted, that this is the only site in all of Lower Merion available. However, at least to my knowledge, since the sale of the seminary to Mainline Health, I'm not aware of any broaching to Mainline Health to see if they would rent or sell the mere 10 acres you need for this project, which I believe is like a quarter of their property. Meanwhile, at Oakwell, millions could potentially be spent to ultimately end up with unusable, damp, wet fields, and or major stormwater damage down the watershed. And recently, I've spoken with multiple other district parents who have up-and-coming children who are in, I would actually say, the 2-year to 2nd grade age group. And they were unaware of this proposal and horrified by it. They said that's not something that they want for their families and their children when they move to the school district, which, seeing the recent thing that was proposed or shown earlier, we saw that the housing has gone up and there have been a lot of sales to families with kids in that age range. And to add to what Holly said, I think that you could have even a high school focusing on environmental or sustainability and have a vocational campus if you are open to alternatives with that property. Thank you.
Charles Klein, Marion Williams, Ben Meyer, and then Ruth Jenkins.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. We have Charles Klein, Bala Kinwood. Thank you for your service. We have 3 kids who received a fantastic education in the Lower Merion schools. I come here tonight to second the comments, the concerns about Oakwell, to urge the board to revisit and revise its predecessor's plans for accessory playing fields at Oakwell. I know I speak for many in LM who want to see our economic and our natural resources used wisely for the best possible outcomes. We all want great playing fields, and we all want to use our money in the most to invest our money in the wisest way possible. Multiple plans have been put forward that would reallocate and reorganize space on existing fields, existing schools, as was recently described, many in much safer and more accessible locations. I would submit that the savings, both financial and ecological, think stormwater management, would be quite significant. I would add that the example we would set for our kids, saving someplace which is notable both for its natural and its cultural history, would be no less important. We should note that this is a landscape that might very well be eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. In closing, I would ask what we want our legacy to be, and I would wonder if clear cutting and a place like Oakwell is what we want our legacy to be. I'm not so sure. I would urge the board to tackle this challenge, and I'm confident that working together, we can make our kids proud and find a solution that both saves Oakwell and saves taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Marion, then we have Ben Meyer, Ruth Jenkins, and Adrian Seltzer.
Good evening. My name is Marion Williams. I live in Bala Kinwood. The Lower Merion School District purchased this property for accessory fields, but what we have since discovered is that it is a gem of a historic property, complete with a horticultural learning facility and an extraordinary opportunity for you. Imagine offering generations of students, K through 12, a lifetime awareness of ecology, the environment, and a lesson in good choices. With the worst effects of climate change upon us, students today are primed for viewing the choice of how this property is used through a longer-term, more strategic lens. Imagine opening up Oakwell to the wider community of learners, adult learners, seniors, homeowners, college students, so they can all learn there. The Delaware Valley is rich with potential partners who already work in this space. The University of Pennsylvania and the Morris Arboretum, Temple University and its Ambler Arboretum, Penn State, Penn Horticultural Society, and on and on. So, I would like to propose that you save Oakwell. Either bring together the brightest heads in our community to help you grasp this wonderful opportunity, or allow Oakwell to pass into other hands that will be good stewards of these old trees. This district could create an innovative new curriculum to expose students to deeper studies of ecology, the environment, and so many fields. As in the STEAM program mentioned previously, the district currently does not have that. You have this opportunity, and I hope that you will, by making a good choice, teach a deeper lesson to our children. Thank you.
Taking my mask off. Good evening. My name is Ben Meyer from Wynwood. I've had 4 kids through Lower Merion School District, and grateful for what I've seen in terms of the quality opportunities for all the kids. Speaking only for myself, in support of the new fields at the middle school at 1835, 1800. Obviously, we have to be respectful to the community and how traffic is routed, but I'll try to make the brief argument here that it's better for the kids and the environment as well, and well as your costs. It was well known when it was purchased, 1860, and the township approved the knocking down of the mansion there and knocking down quite a few trees there as well. It was understood that there was limited sports at that facility. The preliminary sketches had been done: football, track, and tennis, and a small practice field. It was also completely understood that there's 8 fields, sport fields, that are required to be comparable, if you like, equitable with the other middle schools. I'm not going to list all the sports, but there's basically 8 sports that go along with that. And that was known when all these votes were taken and public comments were made. All Lower Merion schools host the majority of their sports fairly near the campus. There's a good reason for this. Lower Merion School District offers terrific late buses for the kids, so that regardless of their socioeconomic status, they can participate and arrive home in a reasonable time to do homework. If you permanently put sports further away, say at Polo Fields or Gladwin Elementary, it would cause the kids to be bused to those fields, then back to Black Rock Middle School, then back. I'm from Penn Wynn, so back to Penn Wynn. So this would permanently add an additional 18 minutes to the shortest. It's worst case at other ones. I'll try to go quickly. The design of 1835 superimposes the softball fields and baseball fields on top of the other fields, so that it actually doesn't eat up more acreage or trees because it's superimposed. So going to the polo fields really isn't a solution for the other 8 fields that are required. I'm going to skip ahead. I've talked about the kids. The costs, I didn't even use the current gas cost, but it's about $13,000 extra a year for 5 buses. And as for the environment, if you go even the 4.8 miles round trip to the polo fields, and it's an additional 14,000 pounds of carbon with fairly efficient buses like you guys use. Obviously, your folks can do better calculations than me. And a mature tree does about 48 pounds of carbon a year. So basically, you're ahead by being close to the school by about 115 trees a year. And that because you're replanting 300. I would encourage you to plant even more trees. And my numbers don't even include other factors that the buses won't be waiting there while, you know, for the kids. They'll be going off to other places if you go to the polo fields.
Thank
But
you,
thank
Ben.
you for your time.
Thank you.
And appreciate it.
Ruth Jenkin, Adrian Seltzer, and then Katie Morris.
Ruth Jenkin, Winwood. My first question is the 3-minute conversation here. Is that a rule? Is that a district rule? Is that a school rule? Whatever. How does that come into play? And if you're on chat, and you can get onto chat 3 different times, that you can speak for 9 minutes. My comment tonight has to do with the district basketball success in my neighborhood. And in my neighborhood, I live right near Lower Merion High School, and the traffic during the day with students speeding and reparking, leaving the school after 2 hours to repark their cars, and leaving garbage and trash is one thing during the day. But the nights of the games were horrendous. Traffic was unbelievable in the dark, traveling around, rummaging around, looking for spaces, and speeding. Going across Montgomery onto Owen on the other side, and there are just not enough spaces for that kind of activity. And if the lights ever go on Arnold Field, it's going to destroy the neighborhood in terms of that kind of traffic. My other comment was the special ed program. Is there a policy of transitioning and mainstreaming the special ed students that are making those kinds of advances so that they can participate in a mainstream education as well as their special education program? As far as the Black Rock Middle School, I think that maybe we should start to think about other things besides traditional sports, that maybe the students could be doing yoga or some other kind of interactive sport rather than the traditional baseball, softball sport. They can do Tai Chi, they can do yoga, there are many other things that can be done besides baseball. Thank you.
Good evening, Adrian Seltzer, Winwood. First, I'd like to apologize for speaking out earlier. Well, not for speaking out, but out of turn. I somewhat got confused with in the township, if they have a specialist come in, citizens are allowed to ask that person questions, relevant questions. And I don't see why that's something that the school district can't do either. And thank you, Mr. Lee, I'll send you that information. I was wondering, I have a couple different topics here. Did the board ever pass a resolution to support the PA school funding lawsuit? It's really important that the more wealthy school districts do support that lawsuit, which is now, they've rested. Also, this is about subcommittee meetings. 99% of the people who took the Stand Up for Lower Merion and Narberth survey said they would like the subcommittee meetings recorded. They are currently not recorded, and 8:30 in the morning is a hardship for a parent getting a kid out to school or getting ready for work. So to have these meetings recorded would be of great benefit to them. And somewhere about 70% said they would be likely, somewhat likely, or very likely to watch those meetings. After we stopped our survey, the ability to comment during Zoom meetings was ended. We received lots of strongly worded comments that kind of decried that decision. The fact that you have to then besides getting your kids off to school, besides getting everything else, you then have to get your tush here at 8:30 in the morning to be able to comment on something at the subcommittee meeting that you can't do otherwise. And I strongly suggest that the board take the time to learn the history of Oakwell. Did you know that bricks that were used in some of those buildings were made by the first integrated company in New Jersey in the 1860s? And I also suggest that you take a tour of the area to know firsthand what you're going to be destroying. Also, would you please respond to the people who have taken the time to come out here and make comments to you? I understand if you don't know the answers to the questions, they can be given at another time, but it would be polite and set a good example for our students so they see there is a point to being civically involved in our community. Thank you.
Katie Morris.
Hi. I'm going to speak about Black Rock, but it's not going to... Sorry, Katie Morris. I live in Wynwood. I see that the human resources actions aren't going to be addressed until after this comment, but I wanted to share my appreciation for Dr. Mobley's recommendation to the assistant principal role at Black Rock Middle School that Dr. Mumin mentioned at the beginning of this meeting. I'm speaking as a current colleague of Dr. Mobley, as a parent of one graduate and one current student in Lower Merion School District. I'm speaking as a resident in the Penwyn catchment and as an educator who's going to be teaching at Black Rock next year. I'll add that I always and especially appreciate seeing smart, hardworking women being recognized. And I've shared this very same sentiment in the past with my former colleague, Sarah Stout, when she was first tapped to be a principal. So I'm here to thank you for promoting from within and for recommending my colleague and friend, Dr. Hamira Mobley, to this leadership role. Thank you.
Sorry, that's all of the in-person comments.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of follow-ups based on questions that were just asked.
Thank you so much, Vice President Lee. There were several comments in regards to the fields and some of the plans of the past and looking at the future, and also a lot of discussion around time limits, and we heard a little bit of information about this, about seminary and mainline health. So I'll start with Mr. Roos in regards to time limits and public board meetings and also seminary mainline health.
Oh, thank you. Yes, the 3-minute time limit is actually, it's a district policy. It's been the district policy for at least 30 years, that 3-minute time limit, but that it is a district policy. It's not a state law or anything. As far as the mainline health and the seminary, they were repeatedly approached at the time the district was looking for fields, and to the point where there were meetings with representatives of the seminary, the township, mainline health, and there was simply no interest at all on the part of mainline health or St. Charles in selling the amount of field space to the school district that it would have required. That was simply not, it simply was not an option. And that wasn't property that the school district could legally even take by eminent domain. So it was a fully explored and not successful option.
One follow-up to that, is it true that the district even went so far as to send a binding letter of intent?
That is exactly correct. The district did send letters of intent with respect to those fields, and as well as several others, not just for the fields, but also for the school. And there was, as I said, there was no interest, and there was no ability on the district to compel them.
One follow-up to the time limit. Is that 3 minutes, is that in line with other school, like, I don't know, other school districts, or
yes.
Is that pretty standard?
That is generally, there's some variation, but generally speaking, 3 minutes is about what you'll see in most districts that I'm familiar with.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roos. Also, Mr. Lill, can you step to the microphone, to the podium, to provide some clarification on the fields at Black Rock Middle School?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ramin. And if you want to indulge, Downingtown STEM Academy was mentioned. At one point in my career, I was the Director of Facilities Planning and Management at Downingtown Area School District. So I do have some familiar with the STEM Academy. As a matter of fact, I opened that building in 2011. Now, specific to the fields and 1860 West Montgomery, the actual campus of Black Rock Middle School, located on that campus are the 4 tennis courts. There is one full multi-purpose PIAA compliant field, rectangular if you will, that is inside a 6-lane track oval. From a dimension standpoint, picture Harrington High School, except that that field at Black Rock will be grass. Harrington's field is artificial turf, but the dimensions and size are almost identical. In addition is a half field. Now, one of the things to take into consideration with the field use is the fields are not lit. Therefore, you have that limited amount of time between the dismissal of the middle school and sunset. So if you look at the fall sports, in theory, you could have football and maybe field hockey at the Black Rock campus in the fall, and then those could use, one uses the half field for practice, one uses the full, and could switch back and forth. Soccer would not have a field available to it. Baseball and softball are completely different dimensions, which the Black Rock campus cannot accommodate. In terms of the interim, when Black Rock opens and the fields at County Line Road are not going to be online, it reminds me of a similar situation to when the 2 high schools were built in Lower Merion, and I was the project manager for both Harrington and Lower Merion. And at that time, when fields were offline, eventually restored, the high school teams had to be moved all over Lower Merion. And that creates additional transportation. But the one thing to point out, and this comes to my department in operations, is community use. There was a very dramatic shortage of fields for community use during the construction of the high schools. And we would have a similar situation with the middle school, both with or without County Line Road fields, is that the more these middle school fields are using other facilities, community use will be affected.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lill. I think the specific question that was asked was whether or not we explored stacking parking.
Sorry. So if you look at the constraints that we've been dealing with that site, we've had to do a substantial amount of rock removal. In order to build that stacked configuration or put parking underground, we'd be removing even more rock. And that's just not feasible based on the amount of work we already did on that site. It just would be more. So that has some very serious implications in terms of cost as well as the layout.
But we didn't know that at the time. Specifically, when we explored, and this happened before I joined the board, but my understanding was there were 2 reasons why a stacked parking wouldn't be possible. One was that it was cost prohibitive, but wasn't there a second set of reasons around it wouldn't be compliant with township regulations or something like that?
The limitation that you have when you try to build a soccer field on top of a parking lot, you need to have a rectangular surface, and you basically need to have something that's going to be a consistent 330, at least 330 feet by 180 feet, 85 feet wide. It was very difficult, if not impossible, to lay that out and have the circulation patterns necessary to get cars and buses through there, particularly at arrival and dismissal. So it was looked at. It just didn't fit in terms of geometry, circulation, the campus layout as a whole.
Okay, so just to summarize, the 2 reasons why the stacked parking never became a viable option. 1 was cost, that it was cost prohibitive, and 2 was we couldn't come up with a plan that would accommodate a stacked parking structure and still get permits or whatever the I'm sure I'm using the wrong language here, but
I think that at the time, and I'd have to go back and look because the zoning code has changed, there was under the old zoning code a limit on building area coverage, the percentage of the campus that could have buildings, structures built on it. and that parking structure field combination would be considered a building structure.
Okay, great. So that's the summary, that cost was one, and that it wouldn't meet the zoning.
Layout, building area coverage, which was a criteria in the old code.
Mr. Roos?
Yeah, and I would have to double check this, but I think there were also Act 34 compliance issues with that, the cost that would have been associated with that.
Right, and yes, and that's what, the cost became important because it would have exceeded the amount we were actually allowed to build. Once we added a stacked parking structure, it made that school building illegal from a cost perspective without going through referendum. Okay, great. Mr. Roos, can you please read the public comments that were submitted via chat?
Yes, I'd be happy to. There are 12 individuals who commented, all district residents. Lauren Brody, Penn Valley. With a toddler at home who can't be vaccinated yet and an immunocompromised family member, we feel like the district's lack of mandated masking and testing for close contacts is creating a dangerous situation that doesn't help protect our most vulnerable community members. We should normalize temporarily masking as a way to care for others. Mark Fasano, Wynwood. Where can we find the demographic report? It's not posted in the agenda on board docs. Thanks. Ezra Wood, Marion Station. Lower Marion School District is taking a very long time in moving to healthier school start times, while numerous other districts have moved high school start times later. Our high schoolers desperately need a later start time. If major change cannot be made for next fall, then a more incremental change should be made. For example, moving all start times 30 minutes later. This would be a minor inconvenience for elementary school families and a very big improvement for high schoolers and middle schoolers. The school district should not let perfection be the enemy of progress. Any alternative schedule is going to be opposed by someone. The current schedule is harmful to our students' physical and mental health and needs to be changed as soon as possible. Jamie Bassman, Ardmore. Both CDC and PA Department of Health guidelines are clear. If students are exposed to COVID through a family member or close contact, they need to be masked in order to attend school. There are times when students will temporarily need to mask because they are at risk of causing an outbreak in their classroom, club, or team. We need to enforce those guidelines for all students, vaccinated and unvaccinated, when they are exposed or recovering from COVID and are potentially able to pass the virus to their classmates and their classmates' families in less than a week's time. Providing notice of outbreaks to the entire school instead of just the impacted cohort will allow parents and students to make informed decisions about temporary masking, cutting down on spread. If we do not normalize temporary masking now in the low community level, it will only be a matter of weeks until we end up in the high community level or need to close down due to staffing issues. Christina Chang, Penn Valley. Will the full enrollment study results be published? How do these results impact the likelihood of full-day kindergarten in September 2022 or 23? Peter Solderich, Haverford. Please update us on the COVID-19 outbreak in Lower Marion High School and its feeder schools. Case counts have been rising the last few weeks associated with those schools. Neighboring districts do not seem to be showing these case rises. If Lower Marion School District were using Radnor School District's 2.5% of a building threshold, Lower Marion High School would have moved back to mask mandatory this week. Given we don't have masks, what mitigation steps are you considering in order to blunt this surge? Why have some of the elementary schools, including Gladwin, stopped allowing children to eat lunch outdoors? It is now spring and we've had relatively good weather. With rising case counts, outdoor lunch should remain an option. The administration should commit to transparency about ventilation, including sharing data on how carbon dioxide monitoring is being used in our various buildings. You upgraded MERV filters 2 years ago, but we now know that more can and should be done. Better ventilation and filtering has long-term benefits beyond COVID. Next is Alexandra O'Neill, Wynwood. Please stream and record the committee meetings. This is an accessibility issue on many levels. Some members of our community cannot physically make the meetings in person. Many are getting their kids to school or traveling to work. And everyone should have the ability to participate from home and/or listen to the recording afterwards so they are able to follow up with full understanding of what happened at the meeting. Carolyn Gosweiler, Ardmore. Given the current uptick in COVID cases throughout the district, following closely on the heels of Lmsb dropping the masking mandate, I find it concerning that we have not been provided with transparency in regards to ventilation throughout our buildings. There has been no established threshold of COVID positivity within our schools that would trigger a return to mandatory masking. Instead of supporting continuity in instruction for our children, teachers and students are falling ill at an increased rate. Lower Merion School District needs to do better. Now that masks are optional even on buses, the administration should commit to transparency about ventilation in the classroom, including specifically sharing data on how carbon dioxide monitoring is being used and what that data has shown in our various buildings. Should the air quality of classrooms and school spaces not be optimal, the district needs to rectify in a timely fashion. Rebecca Peoples, Bryn Mawr. Hello to all board members and thank you to all of you. Tonight's award for the most fiscally meticulous goes to Peter Lee, and my hat is particularly off to him tonight. I was hoping to raise my concerns about COVID cases rising in our district since going mask optional. We have nearly tripled our cases compared to last month, and while I await the results of how this will translate to hospitalizations and other community healthcare utilization, I am concerned. All kids in our community deserve to be protected, particularly our most vulnerable. One-way masking is not adequate, and when cases rise, and we have already met metrics for going back to mask mandates if we think through on-ramps proposed by other districts prior to the CDC revamping its criteria. We need to follow CDC guidelines for masking after exposure and testing prior to return to school after testing positive. I did want to applaud the transparency of our district with its reporting throughout the pandemic. Thanks. Hadash Sheffer, Bala Kinwood. Last year, Kinwood had additional room filters provided by teachers. Bala Kinwood Middle School has none. Can these be brought into the classroom during COVID spikes? Ben Sanger, parent of third grader at Kinwood Elementary. I fully support the district's plan to build new fields for baseball, softball, and other sports like soccer, football, field hockey, and lacrosse that will be used by not only the new middle school, but all students of Lower Merion School District and the rest of the community. Lower Merion School District and Lower Merion Township currently do not have enough fields for its students and the youth of the community. I encourage you to continue your plan to build new separate baseball and softball fields at the Black Rock Middle School accessory field site. Thank you. Last comment is from Jen Gurney, Bala Kinwood. Given the significant increase in positive COVID cases in Lower Merion School District students, what COVID mitigations and policies are currently in place and being put in place? Looking to hear about periodic return to masking, transparency regarding ventilation measures, increased communication regarding positive cases, contract tracing, etc. Parents need specific guidance to plan for our children's safety and well-being. We need better COVID mitigations in place proactively. That concludes the chat comments.
Thank you.
Did you have? Thank you. And just for public comment here, Dr. Gripp's report has been uploaded into board docs.
His presentation.
His presentation. Thank you.
The full report can go in, it did not go in today, but it can go in tomorrow. It'll be on our website and it will also be in board docs.
Thank you so much.
There are two items that are going to be pulled from the consent approval for a separate vote. Item 9B in the student services section. Dr. Momin, would you read that?
Yes, thank you, Vice President Lee. The administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approves the attached Easter Seals Agreement for special instruction services during the 2022 and 2023 extended school year summer program at the set hourly rates described in the agreement.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
But you need an abstention. Oh, this is the consent? Okay.
No, it's not consent.
No, this is,
It's been pulled out.
this is the pullout.
This is which?
The Easter seals
Yeah,
pullout, yeah.
you need a, I think you have an abstention to announce, correct?
Yeah, but I didn't get to that yet.
Oh, okay.
I won't forget.
You won't forget, all right, okay.
Okay. We had a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstention.
Well, you do need to state publicly why you're abstaining.
Oh, I'm abstaining because I am an employee of Easter Seals of Southeastern Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Motion passes. Second will be item 12E, which is, oh, can you read it?
Thank you, Vice President Lee. The administration recommends that the Board of School Directors approves the attached master service agreement and service orders with CenturyLink Communications, LLC, DBA, Lumen Technologies Group for district-wide internet service for the 2022-23 school year and the 2023-24 school years in the amount of, excuse me, $130,782.00.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain. My husband works for Lumen.
Great, thank you. Motion passes. Okay, we'll now move forward with approving the rest of the agenda tonight via consent. Any questions from the board on the rest of the agenda items? Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda via consent?
So moved.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Mr. Roos, can you please give us a report on the Sunshine Act?
Yes, the board met in executive session prior to tonight's meeting regarding a labor relations matter and a personnel matter. Actually, two personnel matters.
Upcoming board meeting dates, which are held 8 p.m. in this boardroom. April 18th, Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting. April 25th, Regular Business Board Meeting. Committee meetings are also held in the boardroom starting at 8:30 unless otherwise noted. March 23rd, Finance and Operations Budget Review. March 30th, Communications and Ad Hoc for Equity and Anti-Racism Workshop. That will be 7 p.m. via Zoom. April 6th, Curriculum. April 8th, Policy. April 20th, Finance Budget Review for Student Services. April 21st, Facilities and Purchasing. April 27th, Finance Budget Review for Staffing and IT. April 27th, also Ad Hoc for Equity and Anti-Racism at 7 p.m. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. And do you want to congratulate?
Yes. Dr. Hamira Mobley, congratulations. We're so happy for you, and it was just beautiful to hear public comments about your history here in the school district, and we're very much so excited to see your future as an assistant principal. Maybe God's talking here. Well, thank you, and congratulations. You might want to share anything about Dr. Mook?
And I just speaking for the board, we're super pleased that you went through this process, and we're looking forward to all the great things you're going to do at Black Rock Middle School. Thank you. Okay, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.